Hey everyone, this is Matt Ricketts with MaidCentral. We're changing it up today. We're doing a new segment today called Tech Talks, where we're going to talk about how technology is shaping the landscape of the residential cleaning world as we know it today, where things are going, and we're going to have guests and speakers on that have different experience from SEO to software development to digital transformation. That's a big buzzword today in business, but we're gonna talk about what that really means, for our businesses. Today's guest today is Dan Hurth. He's from SEO OneClick, and he actually does the SEO for both MaidCentral and for my business, Better Life Maids, Castle Keepers, and quite a few other companies that I'm friends with. Some of them don't want us to share their secrets, so they don't want us telling the name. But there's actually quite a few companies that they do some work for. So Dan, if you want to take a minute and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody! Again, like Matt said, my name's Daniel Hurth. I'm with an agency called OneClick Marketing. We've been doing we started as an SEO agency purely, and we kind of moved into an all-in-one stop shop digital marketing agency, except for the fact of social media. We're more of less lead generation. And I'll be talking a little bit about a lot of that today and going over some Google guidelines. Again, we've been doing this for about 10 years. I have about 25 in-house salaried staff employees that all wear their own hats. We work with, we never really thought it was going to go down this path. We worked with a lot of contractors around the country to begin with. And about 5 years ago, we started getting a few cleaning clients. And then we just got referral after referral after referral. And it kind of snowballed into having about 40, 50 cleaning companies around the country that we currently market for and have for a few years now, and not only in the United States, but also in Canada and Mexico and Ireland. So we have a pretty wide range of knowledge when it comes to what works and what doesn't. Like Matt said, digital transformation is obviously a big buzzword nowadays. There's so many things to do on the internet when it comes to what people want you to do. But what actually works is a different story in a lot of ways. You guys probably look online and you're like Thumbtack, Yelp, SEO, AdWords, social media, all these things that you could probably put your hard-earned money into. But at the end of the day, you probably don't know what works until you try it. Now, the luxury of being able to talk to somebody like myself is I already know what works. I already know the paths that most cleaning agencies should take, from the optimal ROI to the things that are just more for branding purposes. But I'll go over a lot of that a little bit today and over the next several presentations that we have. I think Matt and I are going to be going over a bunch of things and having kind of a guest speaker like myself go over digital marketing in the near term future here.
Yeah, so I haven't been in business for as long as some of our companies out there, but I've been in business since 2008. And when I first got in business, Yellow Pages was kind of on the way out, Google was on the way up, and I could game Google with a few YouTube videos, Twitter links, and I was able to create like a PR40 website, or PR4. The page rank has changed. Within a few weeks. And now that's just not the game that you can play anymore. It's a long-term investment. And you can't just find one or two little hacks and just rise to the top. And if you do, that stuff will get swatted down eventually, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the gaming of the systems was even a part of Yellow Pages. If you remember, people used to name their businesses AAA cleaning services, right? Just so they could get at the top of the Yellow Pages search, because that's how they would game that system. And it's like, Matt, like you mentioned, like in the beginning, when it comes to SEO, probably, and when we say the beginning, we're talking maybe 7, 8, 10 plus years ago, not too long ago, you could literally put a bunch of spammy links to a website, pump that DR way up high, and get it ranked in a matter of weeks. Nowadays, Google's algorithm became so sophisticated. It became more sophisticated after the 2008-2009 financial crisis, where they started to crack down on how easy it was to rank on Google, simply because obviously Google's a major corporation, needs to please investors. Therefore, what happened was they need to have more people filtering over to their Google AdWords and PPC so they can make more money. Therefore, they changed their algorithm up to make it very difficult to rank. So now you have to basically abide by the rules. Otherwise, you're going to be coming in, you're going to probably get to the point where you're going to get either suspended, you're going to get penalized. And, SEO is a really, really kind of a shady industry. I mean, I know I'm a part of it, but, I honestly can say it's a fairly shady industry for what you pay for out there. And you really should know what you're doing before you jump in bed with anybody on this.
Yeah, and again, so we talked about that it's fairly complex. There's a lot that has changed over the years, but there are some kind of bedrock principles that whether or not they did business with you, they should probably kind of invest in right away, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about Google My Business. It's changed names probably a half dozen times since I started business. I remember early on, it was called, is it Google Local Now? Business? I'm sorry. It's changing like so often.
Yeah, it's still Google My Business. It will be changing soon. Google's very slowly but surely moving over to becoming more and more targeted in the local world with LSA ads. I'm sure, as a lot of you have seen out there, with ads being on top of the search above the PPC ads. But yeah, it's still GMB. But yeah, they're slowly going to be changing that as well. They're going to get it a lot more sophisticated with analytics and being able to track things here pretty soon.
Yeah, I think again, it's changed names several times. I remember being able to get on the map pack was just like such a big deal when they rolled that out. Because it effectively was free. It was effectively free space, and it still is the cheapest free space that Google provides. I mean, everything. I mean, you look at the page, and it's before the fold. It's the only free spot you can get. Everything else is basically paid unless you've got your Zoom really small or something like that, right? But like on a phone, it's like paid search. So it actually goes local, paid search, map pack, and then part of the map pack is partly paid as well.
Yeah,
So,
that was fairly new as a couple of years ago, and it was kind of unfortunate in the SEO world to actually start seeing that they started to put paid ads in the map packs as well. And now they're even testing the theory of putting 2 ads in there, because right now it's usually just 1.
yeah. So partly I can see that because the map pack expanded from 3 to 4 and then 5, and like I think I'm seeing 5 in my market now in St. Louis, and I don't know if we would be considered a mid-sized market. We're not big by, we're not as competitive as say Austin, but I have a lot of noble competitors that are, 5 years ago, I was kind of just getting by with just, getting some reviews, keeping my listings up to date. And I was starting to slide off the first page. Even as strong as our history had been, I'm seeing a lot of people competing in this space now. So it wasn't like this maybe 5 years ago. I guess people are seeing the value of being first page.
Well, not only that, Matt, there's been a revolution in entrepreneur, right? And a lot of people have now wanted to start working from home and run their own business instead of working for the man now. So all these people that are independently creating businesses, and obviously we know that the cleaning market's a great place to start for that, right? Just create your own business and work for yourself and start, creating something at a fairly affordable price at the end of the day, compared to a lot of other businesses out there. So there's movement of entrepreneurship is really moving fast in the United States, and COVID's even obviously made that even a bigger deal, right? Now that people are working from home a lot more, they're seeing the value of that, right? So, and they want to see if they can just do it on their own from now on. So it is only going to get more competitive as time goes on. For St. Louis, it's a small, big city, right? Luckily for you, it's not, no offense, of course, it's not a huge desirable city to move to, like an Austin or a Denver or a San Diego, which is very strategic from a marketing and a growth standpoint. But, personal lives, obviously, people want to live where they want to live, and they usually think of that first before they think of the business side first.
Yeah. I think that that's a good point, though. It's like, being able to rank in Pittsburgh or St. Louis or some of these more kind of, like you said, less trendy, maybe, not top tier markets is a big difference versus like DC, Austin, San Francisco, right? Or where's
Oh yeah.
yeah. So
I mean, just to put it in perspective, right? Like to be able to rank, if I took a new company on for our agency to rank them for maid service Austin versus, for instance, maid service, I don't know, Madison, Wisconsin, right? The big difference between those two, you're looking at about seeing an ROI from the money you're paying to get your website ranked about twice as fast in a city like a Madison versus like a city like an Austin. Just because of that, I mean, you're competing against 3, 4, 5 times as many people. Not only that, Austin's a techie area. You got to think about the mentality of people. You got all these big businesses that move to the Googles that and stuff that move to the Denvers, that move to the Austins, that move to the San Diegos, that Seattles, etc. Right? And people there are just more savvy on the internet and understand what needs to be done compared to, I guess, more of a blue collar, less desirable markets like a Cleveland, Cincinnati, Madison.
Right. Well, let's talk about, maybe bring up your presentation. You can kind of run through that and do
Sure.
do the GMB, what they can reasonably probably do on their own checklist wise. I mean, this is a foundational piece that every business should be doing. So, we talked about, how things are transforming. Again, there's a lot that changes regularly, but these are kind of foundation pieces that should at least last another year or two, right? There'll be some updates, but this isn't gonna the sand's not gonna shift out from
Oh, I
tomorrow.
mean, the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today, and just to kind of let you know, there's a topics of the GMB. I like to always focus on the GMB first. I consult with a lot of businesses as well, not just with the agency, but on the side, right? And big corporations, small startups, and they always ask me, "What's the first thing I should focus on?" Right? And is basically what I'm going to be talking about today. And then I've started a few businesses on my own on the side. And the thing is about starting a business is a lot of people think about hiring the staff, getting the operations going, getting your business license, and doing all these things and spending all this money. And then when they open the doors and they're ready to serve the customers, they're like, oh, shoot, I need to get leads, right? So, marketing is always an afterthought, which in most cases, it needs to be the first thought before you even start the business, especially when it comes to market analysis and what you're looking into. And a big part of your marketing is what we call, for the cleaning industry, the holy grail of lead generation is being ranked in the map pack with your most lucrative keywords. For instance, I'll use Matt as an example, maid service St. Louis, house cleaning St. Louis, cleaning services St. Louis. Like those are, and then the near me terms, I always want to include those, because if you open up your phone right now and you search and you just start typing in Google maid service, Google's first recommendation is maid service near me. And then the next one's always going to probably be the city that you live in, right? If you have a completely cached computer or phone. So these are things that you need to think about and do market research before you do that. But with the GMB, to answer Matt's question, the rules behind the GMB are actually very much evolving. So you need to be ahead of those things, because a lot of people like to game the system when it comes to their actual business location, because there's a cost behind it. They're like, oh, do I need to get a physical location, or can I just get some Peel Box for like $10 a month? Right. And most of the time people gravitate towards the cheaper cost, right? But at the end of the day, it ends up costing them a lot of money to do that. Right. So I'm going to talk about the principle behind why it's important, what to do with getting a GMB in the very beginning. And then there's a lot more processes and steps after that, which I'll get into at the end of the presentation. But, Matt, do you have anything before I get into it that you'd like to say?
No, I think let you just kind of share your wisdom here.
Sure. Okay. So obviously, this is a screen here. It's just a little bit about me. Just to summarize, I know that I talked about it already, but this gives you kind of an idea about our agency, what we've been going throughout the years. The clients that we work with, things like that. I'm not going to get into it too much. today, but we do have an extensive amount of experience. We don't just even have this agency. We actually have a whole another agency that's what we call a white label agency that's pure development. So we have a lot of companies that a lot of times you have to realize marketing agencies actually don't do their work in-house. They usually outsource it because it's more beneficial to them. Now, we don't outsource any of our work. We're more of a boutique agency. We like to be in control of everything. And nowadays, when it comes to search engine optimization, that's the most important thing, is to be in control of the backlinks you get, the content that you provide, the website coding aspects. And most of the time, people are still in 2010, 2005 world of SEO, and they just continually outsource it. But we have an outsource agency that's for development purely of coding. Like, we've taken on projects for, Zillow's website, American Standard's website, and many others. But, just want to give you kind of an idea. We're a full service agency except we don't do social media, which is kind of funny because my first marketing job I took on was a VP of a social media marketing firm for 3.5 years before starting this agency. So I know an extensive amount about it. It can be okay for lead generation, but it's definitely lower on the totem pole when it comes to lead generation. But yeah, so it gives you a little bit of an idea, and I'll talk strictly about the cleaning industry today. And the first things I'm going to really go over is the official GMB guidelines. Now, this can be a little bit boring, but it's very important to understand. This is purely from what Google says in their guidebooks about what the guidelines they want any business to follow when it comes to getting registered in their GMB Google My Business profile. And literally one of the things that's ever evolving is they're starting to crack down on the people that are, what we talked about earlier, gaming the system by getting multiple PO boxes in the same city or fake addresses or things like that. We've actually have taken on cleaning clients where a couple months later, their addresses were suspended and they've had the same address registered in the GMB for a decade, right? So Google will come in there, not even give you warning, and suspend your address if you're not following guidelines. Now, there is times that you can get away with it for a certain period of time, but you better believe in the next few years plus that you're going to end up getting suspended if you're not doing this properly. And it's just the way Google's movement is going. Right. So we always want to abide by the guidelines no matter what as an agency, because it's our butt that's on the line when people are paying us to do a good job. Right. So we want to make sure we're following the right rules and that you guys have a thriving business for the many decades to come. So locations that are not permitted, I'll talk about that right now. Using a UPS store address. This is a popular one. It's cheap. It's affordable. There's UPS places all over the thing. But again, that is not permitted. Google only allows one registered business per location. Now, that doesn't mean that at a location there can't be multiple suite locations. Now, multiple suite locations are fine. But if you're using the same address and don't have a suite location as other businesses, you can't get registered there. So UPS stores do not work anymore. Using a PO box, very similar to what a UPS store address would be, because you basically rent out a mailbox, but PO boxes do not work either. And there are probably some of you on here that I'm going to go through that are probably thinking to themselves, oh, well, I have this. I know it works, right? I'm just going to keep it there. But be cautious. It's totally fine. But eventually, if you do get suspended, it's like starting all over again. And that is something you don't want to do. So using a virtual office, shared office spaces, this one can be a little confusing just simply because there are some shared office spaces that work out there and there are some that do not. No virtual offices work. Like, for instance, Regis, very popular name around the country for people that have office spaces or shared office spaces. Believe it or not, Regis's don't get registered with Google's GMB. So Regis's do not work, but that's an example of a shared office space. So these are things that you need to kind of research to be able to see if they work or not a little bit, which I can get into a little bit more later. A move suspension from moving from a shared office to a new location. So that's another one. Using an address that's already been used from other GMB listings. Like I said, you can't have multiple GMB listings for the same address. Displaying a residential address for a service area. Now, this one's kind of touch and go a little bit, right? Because we do have residential offices specifically in smaller markets that work just fine. Like, we have a cleaning company in Alaska in a very small town, right? And they're totally fine with using residential addresses. Whereas, for instance, if you have a company in Atlanta, they would not be fine with that. So it's the smaller markets tend another good thing about going after a smaller market is simply because you have more leeway with Google, because Google's more attacking the bigger markets where a lot more spam activity is happening. Whereas smaller mid-range or smaller markets or towns even are totally fine. Google understands that residentials are going to be maybe some of the only options that you guys have. So Google is sophisticated enough to understand this, and they're only going to get better with their AI learning. So residential addresses can work in some spots, but do not work in others. And just to let you all know, residential addresses, all the addresses themselves can be hidden. And that's totally fine under Google's guidelines, because you obviously don't want somebody driving to your house or finding you online and going to your private residency. So you can hide it with Google's GMB, and that's totally fine. It doesn't hurt your rankings or anything. And then the final one here, GMB listing is for a business that offers a service or a class in a building not owned by a company. For example, a personal trainer offering classes at a local gym, right? So again, just another way you can't pile on the same addresses and things like those. The most important ones here are usually the shared offices, the PO boxes. Those are the ones I see the most when talking to cleaning clients for the last several years, that they usually do have and want to know if they can get away with. And it makes sense. It's affordable, it's cheap, but at the end of the day, it's not what Google wants to see. So a little bit more about the guidelines, other aspects to prove compliance. So once you have an actual address that works, you need to be able to prove your compliance now with Google. This is fairly new as well. So you need to represent your business as consistently represented and recognized in a real world across signage, stationery, and other branding. So what that basically means, once we get a office registered with Google, Google also wants you to submit images and pictures of, for instance, your door with a logo, your office pictures, things like that, to prove it's legitimate. And Google's moving more and more down this path to prove your legitimacy. So if you do have a PO box and Google wants to prove it, and you need to prove it with Google to register that address, you won't be able to, because Google will obviously see that's fake. Right. So yeah, this is something we do with all of our clients nowadays, is we have to ask them for pictures of their office spaces and things like that. And to be honest with you, a lot of times people can get away with certain things. I've seen people Photoshop logos on doors and hand in those pictures, and those been proven. But we don't advise it, but there are ways to get around things sometimes, especially if it's your only option. Second here is make sure your address and or service area is accurate and precise. So this just basically means that you're putting your address and your service areas in their GMB and making it as accurate as possible to where your office is. Fairly common sense there. Choose the fewest number of categories it takes to describe your overall core business. So in the GMB, you'll notice there's an area where you can put your categories. For you guys, it's fairly simple. You know exactly what you are. For other companies, it's not as simple, right? I'll give you an example. There's HVAC companies out there that do HVAC. They also do plumbing, and they also do solar. We have a few of those types of clients, right? So, and they have all different types of services that Google doesn't really like, and they usually will only try to rank that GMB location with one of those services. But with the cleaning industry, for you guys specifically, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Next is there should be only one profile per business. So we've talked about this a little bit. Basically, what this is you don't want a disorganized GMB profile with multiple GMBs listed. You want to clean that all up. You want to have only one listed, so it doesn't confuse Google and the maps and then the search, right? And so it doesn't cause problems. We've had many clients that have tried multiple GMB listings that are still out there in the cloud, essentially, and Google sometimes gets confused which one's the correct one and which ones doesn't. So it's just cleaning it up a little bit. So finally, to ultimately prove this, and in fact, I just went through this myself with another of mine, is creating a DBA. Doing business as is what a DBA stands for, that matches your GMB name. Now, keep in mind, I'll use Matt as an example. Matt's business is Better Life Maids, right? Now, one of the smartest things to do with your GMB profile is to add your service area in there. So for instance, Better Life Maids of St. Louis. So basically when people search maid service St. Louis, Matt has a strategic advantage because that keyword is in the actual name, even though it's not the actual name of his legal business. Therefore, he has to get a doing business as a DBA to attach to what exactly his GMB name is. Now, I would recommend doing this after your talk to your marketing team or your marketing consultant when you figure out what the best name to take advantage of the GMB and what you want to rank for specifically in your areas, and then get a DBA after that. But that's what I would recommend. You can do this with LegalZoom. It's right around $100, but it's absolutely necessary when it comes to this because you're basically legalizing your location. Okay. Next is
real quick.
yeah, sure.
In a lot of states, you can just go to the Secretary of State and file this. It's probably $16. And then what you want to make sure you look at is really carefully is what the renewal period is, because a DBA is not a perpetual legal entity. 100%. So you have a renewal period typically. So you just want to make sure you create a calendar event or something to remind you to renew. So in Missouri, it's either 5 or 7 years. I can't remember off the top of my head. I just have, every time I renew it, I just have my office set a calendar reminder about 3 months ahead of time, and we just renew it every 5 years or so.
Yeah, and that's a great point. You got to remember the same thing with, like, for instance, your SSL certificate on your website. A lot of people forget to renew that as well. But it's a great point at DBA. You can literally go down to your Secretary of State. Now, I know a lot of you might have businesses that you operate and you don't even operate in that state where you live. So LegalZoom's kind of like the facilitator. You pay a little bit extra for them to actually facilitate and do it all for you and send it to the county and all that kind of thing. Or you can just do it yourself if you want to save a little bit of money. But that's a good point, Matt. So those are the official guidelines. That's the stuff that it's important to understand. It's somewhat boring. I get it, but it is, and it can be somewhat frustrating because you're probably thinking to yourself, it's like, oh man, I don't want to do this. I don't want to get a real office space and things along those lines. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't fight it. Just do it right from the very beginning, because overall, if you don't do it right from the very beginning, it'll end up costing you more money at the end of the day. So how to pick a best location. Now, this is extremely important, right? This is the second part of what I'm going to be talking about today. First thing I always say to all the clients is ask yourself, what areas within my city do I want the most clients? Okay. So cities can be very large. The Dallases, the Atlantas, the New Yorks, all these big area cities, right? You can't rank for the entire city in your GMB location. So therefore, is your business model to go after, for instance, vacation rentals? Is your business model to go after more affluent neighborhoods that have more money to spend on maid services? You got to, and then what suburbs are those going to be in, right? And I could use many examples into this, but you must ask yourself, what is the area or areas that you want the most business in? And typically that's where you're going to want your GMB location. Now there's a lot of tools out there that you can research and take a look into it. Some cities work just fine, like St. Louis works just fine. It's not a huge city, but you got other cities, like for instance, Dallas is a good example. I've had a client that was in Dallas, but they also wanted all their business in Grand Prairie, right? Which is basically north of Dallas. So they needed to get a GMB there and not in Dallas, as an example, right? So you must ask yourself where you want to get the most clients, and that's where you should centralize your GMB location or your office space. Okay. Again, like I said, consult with your marketing agency about this, because they'll be able to go through, the analytics behind how much search volume is going to potentially be there, taking a look at how big is your radius and how well you can rank it in those spots, and your competition, most importantly, and that's another thing you should think about. Do you really want to compete against 50 other people in that same area, or do you want to go to a different suburb area across on the other side of the city where there's maybe 5 competitors? Right. So this is all market research that you need to do before you actually make a decision in general. So again, to consult with your marketing team or your marketing agency or person when you do this before you actually 100% follow through with your GMB. And then a lot of times I get, where can I find affordable offices, right? Once they bite the bullet and they're like, oh shoot, I got to do this. Then, typically what we personally do for our clients is we'll go on to platforms. Specifically, first is Craigslist. Typically you can find good, affordable office spaces, nothing glamorous, because I know you don't need to be at the office, most of you guys. And I know that you'll barely ever use that office. You pretty much are using it for marketing purposes. So you can find affordable offices, mom and pop type of offices that you can register your own address with Google. Craigslist is a good place to start with that. Why is it so important?
Before you go on, I wanted to kind of show them
Sure.
how this kind of plays out over time with your how this kind of your marketing with GMB kind of creates some density. Some of this is kind of unintentional. Like if you look at this map here and we zoom in, my office is right, if I can find the pins. The pin's right there. So a lot of density starts to happen based on like the radius that you are from your business. So what he's talking here about is, guys, is that where do you think the most business is going to come from? And potentially, like if I were to put my office here where there's a big box of business, I might not be reaching out as far into these other areas either. So by kind of getting a little bit more central as to where I placed my office, I'm kind of seeing the density kind of naturally happen around, based on, there's a map. I don't know if you have a demonstration in your slides about the map and how you rank in different quadrants. But this is a pretty good example of it, because you can see as I kind of get further and further away from the office, that density kind of starts to spread out a bit. Less and less jobs kind of just make their way to us in the form of leads and other things.
And that isn't coincidental either. So that is a very, very good point. It's a very good point. All right. So going back to, again, why is this location important? Matt it was a good lead into it right there. At the end of the day, the reason for this location is to create more business, aka more money, right? The GMB, as we discussed earlier, this area right below the maps, is the holy grail of lead generation for business. For the cleaning industry, the number one source of new business is going to be your GMB. And I say new business because referral business is a big part of your business, right? When you're first starting off, though, you don't get much referral business. So you have to rely on the new business to be able to even achieve referral business, right? So the biggest lead generator of the new business, and I'm talking anything from AdWords to social media, and I can prove this with every account that we have, is being ranked in the GMB location right here. That's why this is so important to have our first presentation about this and following the guidelines. That's why it's so important to follow the guidelines, because you want to do this one perfect. So this area right here on this is the number one source for lead generation. As an example, to show it from a statistical sample, I just put one quick statistic in here, and this is my example of cleaning services. So I pulled up one of our tools called Ahrefs. It's a very sophisticated tool that I use for all my clients when I review their competition and stuff with them, when I have, demos or things like that. But you can see just in the US statistic for cleaning services, the searches without clicks, 53%. That's important to understand, because over half the people that go onto the first page of Google searching for cleaning services do not click on anything. But that doesn't mean they don't utilize the first page, right? They can call the phone number, as you can see on this right side. They can call that phone number, call your business after they see all your star ratings and things like that on the right hand side right here. They can call your business, and that's considered a search without click. But the only way to be able to achieve that from an SEO perspective is in the GMB, because anything below the GMB, those first 10 positions that you see below the GMB on page 1, they don't have phone numbers or anything like that. It's as visible. They don't have reviews that are as visible as this. So you can get a lot of just by being in here, you can get a lot of calls without getting clicks. Not only that, we'll talk about a little bit about AdWords, but we'll probably hit on that topic a little bit on a later date. But paid clicks, 8%. Only 8% of the time on average for people searching for cleaning services in the United States, they actually click on Google AdWords. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I need leads now. I should focus on this and spend all my money here. But you're missing out on 92% of the clicks on the first page by focusing on AdWords. It is a lower form of actual business when it comes. In fact, I don't recommend very many people in the cleaning industry to use AdWords unless you're doing it very targeted and you have extra money to burn from a budget standpoint. But so, overall statistically, not many people click on AdWords nowadays. And I mean, if you just use your own behavior when you search something, whether you need an electrician or a locksmith, do you click on the ads or do you scroll right past them? Just ask yourself that. And then, take a look at organic clicks, which are organic clicks below is actually the GMB can be considered an organic click, or any of the positions below the GMB can also be considered an organic click, is 34% of the time. So, between searches without clicks and organic clicks, you're talking that's about, statistically right now in the United States, about 87% of everything. So you really need to dominate those types of areas. And continuing, why is the location so important? This is a good example. I'm going to use Tom's company, Castle Keepers, one of his locations as Charleston, North Carolina, which I'm going to kind of point out right here. As we saw in this last slide, he's here right here as well. Castle Keepers, house cleaning of Greenville.
This one's Greenville, so
Greenville, his other location. But I want you to take a look at the map radius as when you see it here in search. You're going to see it, it doesn't extend very much past the downtown area or the Greenville airport area right here, right? So if his location was a little bit outside this map, he probably wouldn't be ranking as well. So that's, again, the radius of where you're going is important. But if you take a look at his Charleston location, one of his things when we first came on here is he didn't really necessarily want business downtown, because if he did try to go for business downtown, as you can see right here in Charleston, right below here, his radius doesn't even extend there with his GMB location. So it's impossible for him. If anybody wants a cleaning service in the middle of Charleston, downtown Charleston, he won't show up in the maps just because his location is north and more of the suburbs area. And you can see right where this number 1 is in the center right there, that's where his business location is. And this is a program that we use for all of our clients. It's a fairly expensive one. It's called Local Falcon. And this kind of shows you the radius of what you can extend with your business location in a lot of ways. And you can see this is as far as you can extend in the GMB maps. And the further you extend, you can see the worse the ranking can be. Okay, so it's a limited Google ranking reach. And this is different in there's not a 30-mile radius, a 10-mile radius. It can be, but it can also be a 2-mile radius. It really depends on the area and the city that you're in and how how Google's maps is located in that city, right? So, just again, you take a look at this radius. This is really what it will cover. This is why it's important to find the location that you want. Eventually, you might need multiple GMB locations. So, for instance, I've talked about this with Tom as well. We've talked about James Island and Sullivan's Island in Charleston area right here. Eventually, if he wants to expand upon his business, which he eventually will, it's totally okay to get another office space once you are successful in this office space, say for instance in the James Island area or the Charleston downtown area, and then you have 2 GMB locations within the same city that can rank for multiple different areas. That's totally okay to do it, but that's going to be your next step after dominating your first location. Summary of qualification and location, right? So just to kind of reiterate, why is the type of office important? The type of office is very important. Just to summarize this is simply because if you do it, if you kind of game the system, you're eventually going to get suspended and have to start all over again. So I would recommend doing it right from the very, very beginning and consulting with your agency or company to be able to do so. Why is the location of the office important? Well, we just kind of went over that part. If you take a look in this map, this is a company we have out in Fort Collins called All Star Cleaning that is, wants to rank for Fort Collins, but her most important area was South, right? So, it was very important for her to dominate this area. And so that's why the office space was put there, right? So again, if you want business from the most affluent neighborhoods, get your GMB office in that neighborhood centralized. Okay. This was, and then just to reiterate, you guys, this was step one, maybe partially step two of a 10-step process on really how to optimize your maid company's GMB. I talk about this one first as the most important one, simply because if you don't do this step right, none of the other steps matter. Okay. So, getting this step right first, then everything else can come from there. And that's kind of finalizes my discussion a little bit about GMB location as the first part today. If you guys have any questions about this or concerns about this, feel free to reach out to me. I have my emails right there. If you guys want to email me, we also have an infographic and a blog that describes each of the 10 steps that should be taken. If you want some of that information, just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to provide you a link and the infographic to that to kind of assist you guys a little bit. If you guys would ever like to talk, my Calendly link is right there as well. I think probably Matt will provide it at some point in time as well. But that's my Calendly link right here if you guys ever want to talk. And then the next presentation that I'm hoping to have with you guys is more steps to get your GMB ranked, which is going to be more in-depth conversations to these 10 steps right here. And then finally, just to kind of show Matt's company off here on how well of a job he does, you can see Better Life Maids right here and where he wants to rank. And his grid, as you can see, there isn't a single spot on his grid where he doesn't rank in the top 3 of the maps. And that is one of the big reasons why Matt is so successful today. And now he gets to teach everybody. So he does a very good job, has very good reviews, but that just gives you kind of an idea of the person that you always hear from every day and how well he's doing. So he does very, very good.
Yeah. And, I think, this is not out of reach for people to accomplish. It's an investment though. It is. I've got, a 12-year head start, but, there's companies that you could start making some progress on. I remember years back when I started overtaking some companies and I was doing some things that they weren't, but so I had some compare us pages. And I remember one of my local competitors was so mad, called me up and I was like, I didn't say anything bad about you. I just compared you. And I said, I was like, look, you should be doing the same thing I'm doing. And I apologize if you feel like that's
it's almost like a compliment.
Yeah. I apologize if you feel like that's not, representative. If you feel like there's anything on that chart that's not true. Do you guys offer online booking? Do you guys offer, a portal where your customers can log in and make changes to their next cleaning? Those are just the comparisons I'm making. I'm not comparing the quality of your work or whatnot, but I'm comparing the technology we leverage for our partners, for our companies, our customers, some things like that. So, and I do think that stirred the pot. I do remember that particular company. They've definitely made some big strides in SEO over the years. I definitely fired them up to be a stronger competitor because they're like a 40-year-old company. They've been around since 1979 or something like that. And they've been relying on their kind of reputation for far too long. So I think they were used to being first on search and things like that. And then to see some kind of younger startup company kind of overtake them, it was frustrating to them. So you're not going to make friends as you kind of hop over people because they're making the investments too. But you are gonna put more money in your pocket if you're making investments in digital marketing, that are lasting. So, one thing I will disagree with Dan on a little bit on Facebook, but I won't disagree on the point that Google is a better long-term investment because the problem with Facebook is that the money you spend every month is gone, right? It's like if you didn't target well, if you didn't build your ads well, if you don't have a good strategy, Google will take your money. Not Google, Facebook will take your money and it's gone and they don't really care. They just want you to spend money on ads and so forth. It's not a lasting impact like this. This is more of a long-term investment that pays dividends. So you're putting in a quarter today that might pay a quarter next month, that might pay a quarter the month after that. and so forth and so on. Whereas Facebook is, that quarter, that dollar goes in, and whatever pops out right then is all you're ever going to see from that dollar. So I see this as kind of a perpetual investment versus Google Ads done well delivers a lot of value and can create a dominant position in your marketplace as far as
Where
people sense that they see you everywhere because they spend. I don't know what the number is anymore. It's been a couple years since I looked, but the amount of time that's spent on Facebook has to have declined, and it's probably moving to Instagram, to Snapchat, to other platforms. But there was a time where people were spending like 3 hours a day on Facebook. It was some absurd number, and I assume that's declined over the last 2 or 3 years. These elections don't help anything, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Facebook is not perpetual like the way Google is.
Yeah, what I've seen with social media, I called it like it's lower on the totem pole of focusing on, right? Because what I've seen with any ads, and this is very consistent, the companies that have been around for a while that have branded power, the ads like Facebook ads and Google AdWords work a lot more effective than if you're a brand new company on the block, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have that street cred of being online and things along those lines. And not only that, there's two other examples I can give. Like, it's like, first of all, your Google AdWords clicks, like a maid service St. Louis or any kind of maid service in any city, you're probably going to pay between $8 to $14 for that high quality click with no guarantee for a conversion. And not only that, I always just put my clients in their own spot, right? If you had a house that you needed to be cleaned, what's the first thing that you do to find a cleaner? Right? Do you hop on Facebook and find the ad, or do you go to Google and try doing your own research? Facebook's a good market to be able to go out and get people that maybe are kind of thinking about it, right? And you're going out for that kind of outreach. But at the end of the day, marketing isn't just about platforms. It's about the psychological aspect of your actual clients themselves. So you got to ask yourself, if you were a client, or if you wanted clients, what's the first thing they would do to find your service, right? Would it be going to Thumbtack, Google, or anything like that? Typically, most cases, people are going to go to Google and do their own research, especially since the number one market that's coming up nowadays that needs houses clean is the millennial market. The millennial market doesn't knock on doors or talk to neighbors or things along those lines. They do their own self-research and look through reviews and find people in search that way. But when it comes to social media, it definitely can be a lead gen avenue, but I would definitely build up your brand and focus on other areas maybe first before you jump into that area.
Even with what you just said, actually, that actually makes sense to make this investment first, because think about it like this. So they saw your ad on Google or on Facebook, right? And then they went and searched you, because actually that's typically what happens with a lot of your ads, is that you're going to see what you described happen, is that they saw your cool ad on Facebook, and then they went ahead and they went to Google and they searched for your brand. If your brand reputation doesn't match your advertising, they're going to move on, and basically they're going to see the next company on that list and click on them. So I think what you described is important, is that you probably need to build this as a foundation first, and that's basically the way I would look at this, is more foundational than those other things are kind of attractive in the fact that it's it's kind of money on demand if you do it right, but they probably don't work as well if you don't have the brand to back it up.
Yeah, and if you think about clients, right? Like, or just maid companies. Let's just say you're not as established as some other maid companies out there, right? And then let's say you jump into Google AdWords first to try to bring business. And let's say you don't have any branded power, people don't know who you are, and you spend a few $1,000s on AdWords and you don't get anything in return. You're immediately, as a business owner, especially a first-time business owner, you're going to get discouraged into the marketing world. Right. So, there's certain things that you should definitely do first, so you don't get discouraged, that that will work right away. Like Google AdWords, a great example is I was going through a Google AdWords account in Atlanta for a maid company the other day, and they spend, $1,500, $2,500 a month, at kind of an average budget for an AdWords campaign. And I was going through their campaign, and the majority of their conversions, and when I say majority, I'm talking 85, 90%, was because of their branded name. It was people actually searching their branded name, right? Now, there's a strategy behind that, having it or not having it, but most of the conversions came because the people already knew who they were, right? So that is another thing you got to think about when doing an AdWords or PPC campaigns is a lot of times people look at PPC campaign and be like, oh my gosh, this works great. But then when you actually dig into it, it only is doing great because they're Googling your name and then clicking on your ad, right? So you probably would have had that business regardless, or it was business already. Whereas, for instance, being found in search with SEO, it's self discovery of somebody that never knew who you were to begin with, right? So
Yeah.
things to think about, and like and with ads and stuff like that, any ad avenue from Thumbtack to Yelp to social media to SEO, they all work and they all have a purpose, right? But from a totem pole standpoint, there's some that should be focused on first, and then you go down from there. Like, for instance, don't make your website unless you already know what your SEO strategy is behind your website, right? A lot of times people create a beautiful website, spend a ton of money on it, but nobody sees it because it's not visible. So you need to be able to have your SEO strategy. Another tip for you guys, have your SEO strategy dialed in before you actually start focusing on building a brand new website or redesigning your current website.
Cool. So I did. I dropped a link in the chat here. So if you go to maidcentral.com/SEO, I fixed all those links. You can book a demo with Dan and his team, and they have some packages. I'm going to share my screen here if I can. Let's see. It's probably worth just kind of going over with everyone that we have some introductory packages that are available for. Let me pull up your add to stream here. So basically, there's a package here that's like $195, and you're kind of a starter, company, and you want to get the basics going. That one is a great deal, I feel like, for some companies. I'm kind of more like in this SEO essentials kind of mode where I'm trying to protect what I have, and then also kind of just build a moat around what I've built already. And that's what you guys help me do with that kind of essentials package. And then if you're in like a competitive market, like we talked about, the SEO advanced is kind of the next step up, which is, you're going to need more activity, more links, more press releases, more on-page SEO to be relevant. So do you want to talk about any of these, and we can talk about how they can book a demo with you?
Yeah, I could talk from the SEO basics package is just basically getting your website going, a nice little simple templated website, getting the speed optimized, getting MaidCentral fully integrated, that platform, the booking platform with you guys, getting your Google Analytics set up, because some of the first things that you should do is have a website that's fast. You should get the MaidCentral integrated properly. You should get your Google Analytics tracking, because without analytics, there's really no point in understanding what you're doing from a marketing side. So that's just the fundamentals. It's just kind of like a starter package. Now, if you want to rank and you want to create new business all the time, that's the SEO essentials package. And just to put it in retrospect from a cost standpoint, I really want people to understand, everybody knows they need to invest in their business to be able to get business out of it, right? At the end of the day. And you look at it from an investment standpoint, most of our cleaning companies that start from zero to $10,000 in revenue per month, some of the lower end types of companies that have just started out, we've had companies in about a 3-4 year time frame that went from making about $5,000-$6,000 a month to like 30, 40, and some about 150 to 250,000 in about a 3-year period, right? So if you think about that as an investment in the long term, the money that constantly goes up from being ranked in search and getting more and more keywords ranked in search over time, it's a no-brainer at the end of the day. In fact, the businesses that I've started off with, all my knowledge that I've done this, like my own personal business, like I just started for instance, as an example, a commercial pressure washing company, right? The first thing I did was optimize the website and pay for SEO. Yeah, that's right. I paid for SEO even though I have an agency, because what people don't realize is the number one cost behind SEO is the acquisition of high authoritative backlinks. That might be a little bit over everybody's head, but that's basically other websites and blogs and mommy blogs that talk and mention your website and point a link back to your website, which those are not free in today's world, unfortunately. Like, for instance, we just got a link on Bloomberg for one of our clients that cost $1,200 just for that one link. So a lot of our cost goes to that. And then obviously that's kind of the essentials package. The advanced is basically turbocharging that.
Give them a free idea though, this is the kind of the links that I look at, even though I'm paying them for SEO too. Like, so if local charities ask me to donate to their event and things like that, I will go and research their webpage and I'll find out what the packaging entails. And sometimes I'll make $1,000 donation to a charity if it'll put, I love the charities. I actually do have my own charity that I'm on the board of directors for, that I'm very involved in. But I'll oftentimes, depending on what kind of backlinks they'll give, if it's a national charity and they, even if it's a sub page locally, I still will make a larger donation, because I look at it as A, it's good for business. We're putting ourselves out there, and B, oftentimes those pages get left up for years and can rank for a very long time. So, just that's not.
And organization links, like, that's smart. That's a good point, because .org links is what you probably get from those types of charity. A .org link is a very high quality backlink, right? Especially, if you do the research, you guys probably get emails all the time being like, hey, do you guys want to share a backlink? You might get some emails like that, or share a blog post. But never just say yes. Always do the research behind the website or the organization before you get that backlink. But this is what we do. This is basically the majority of what we do in-house. We have an outreach team that does this constantly to mommy bloggers, webmasters, things like that. And then just, the SEO advanced package is basically just taking that essentials package, adding more links, more pages, more keywords, more areas to go after all at once, right? We have costs as an agency. Our biggest cost is backlink acquisition. Our second biggest cost is actually our employees. Our third biggest cost is GMB citations and directories, which is another important thing, because not all citations and directories out there that you might find, like Facebook.com is a citation directory, right? But some of them are actually, you have to pay to have. Sometimes you have to pay to have like a BBB link. Sometimes you have to pay to have certain types of links and citations out there. So that's our third cost. And then, we make a little bit of profit, of course, on top of that. But that being said, these are our packaged. I'd be happy to go over them more in detail about what you get out of them and why it's worth it at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, you want to make money from what you put in. The one unfortunate thing from SEO that everybody needs to understand, SEO or website development, is you don't see an ROI in those first couple months. It's impossible. Google's algorithm simply just does not allow you to rank that quickly. If you did rank that quickly, that probably means you're doing what we call black hat SEO, and you'll eventually get penalized. But, you're talking about an ROI from this types of things from anywhere, depending on where you live, from 5 months to up to a year, right, to start seeing an ROI from it. So just mentally put it in your head. Say you're paying $2,000 a month. Mentally put it in your head that you're going to be spending $12,000 to $24,000 to start seeing a return on your investment, right? And that's important to understand, because everybody knows you have to invest into the business to see money out of the business. But if you invest $24,000 in a year and you start to make $30,000 to $50,000 in a month, it's a pretty good investment at the end of the day, as long as the company you go with, like for instance us, knows what they're doing.
Cool. Well, we're right at the top of the hour, so we're gonna wrap it up here. I'm gonna thank you for joining us today. A lot of great information. I think, again, we're at a tipping point now with technology where, there's a lot of things you could be doing, but this seems like it's been around forever, but it's constantly changing, constantly evolving, and it's definitely transformed the way we do business. And I want to dive into more topics like this with you. It was awesome to have you today, Dan.
Yeah, hey, thank Matt for having me as well. Yeah, I would love to have more topics about this. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the next topic would be to keep on focusing on the GMB because, again, just to everybody in the audience, getting ranked in the GMB for the areas you want to clean in or you want to service in is by far and away the most important for new business generation. So I want to stick on this topic. Basically, what I'm going to do from a topic standpoint, depending on how many we have, Matt, is I want to go from the most important and constantly just keep going down on topics based on from my experience of marketing for cleaning, dozens and dozens of cleaning agencies for many years.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. And if you weren't on the live and you have any questions, again, just go to that MaidCentral.com SEO/SEO. Book a meeting with Dan. They can walk you through what they can do for you. If you have any questions for me, obviously I'm in this Facebook, one of these Facebook groups pretty much all the time. You can reach me. So hit me up if there's any questions. Have a great day, guys.